From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media. A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gornoski. So glad to be with you once again here in our Sunshine State headquarters for all things A Neighbor's Choice. Hope you're doing well this week. Hope you've had a great week and you're ready for a great time with friends and family and having a good time in the weekend. And we're glad to have all of our listeners. If you're listening on podcast, share the link. If you're listening on live stream, share. And if you're listening on Radio Land, make sure you set the dial for this station so that you know where to go each day, weekdays, Monday through Friday. And there's a lot to cover, but I want to do what we always do on this program, which is instead of just bringing on talking heads that just want to kind of regurgitate whatever the establishment line is in D.C., we want to provide people with real skin in the game, with people that have done extensive research with people on the ground in the field of the subject that we're covering. And in this case, we're going to explore foreign policy, and we're going to explore the excesses and the indulgences of our surveillance state and the excesses and the indulgences of our federal police bureaucracy. In this case, we're talking about Obamagate. What has been called Obamagate by the president encapsulates the entirety, or that we're aware of the extent that the Obama administration surveilled not only the Trump candidacy, but also the Trump administration, allies in the media appears to be, and even other candidates. I remember Senator Rand Paul talked about how he had evidence that Brennan and others were surveilling him. So to do this, I'm joined by a prolific writer and host of the Scott Horton Show. Scott Horton, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
And it's great to be with you here because I don't go to the partisan groups to get the truth. I want to get to the people who really are just going to lay it all out for us without some kind of partisan agenda. And one of the things that really annoys me is whenever, you try to push back against the what happened with the Russiagate story and what is evolving to be this Obamagate scandal, is that we've been so conditioned in a binary way to think, well, if you're defending Trump's allies from being persecuted, therefore you are on Team Trump. And that's just such a childish binary way of thinking that the media has tried to box us into.
Yeah, well, that's true. And you know what, honestly, people who've known me my whole life or, for many years on a personal level, who know that I hate all presidents. I always was opposed to everything that Bill Clinton, George Bush, Barack Obama, and Donald Trump do. Always. This has happened to me over and over again. I start to say something just that's essentially whatever kind of general slam on Nancy Pelosi or something. And then the reaction is, see? Sound like you're starting to be pretty pro-Trump there. Mm-hmm. Even though I hadn't said a word about Trump. I was only addressing something bad about a Democrat. It's just the presumption. But, on Russiagate, Dave, I know you know that some of the very best critics of Russiagate have not been Trump supporters on the right, although there have been plenty there. But also there have been a lot of leftists and progressives like Glenn Greenwald, Aaron Mate, Matt Taibbi, and others who have done great work and disbelieved the Russiagate story all along just because it's not true. And essentially they're left enough to not be Democratic partisan. Personally, I'm a libertarian. So I have never been partisan for the left or the right, and I am not a Trump supporter, but I surely am on, his side of the narrative as far as that goes when it comes to this Russiagate scam. No question about that.
Well, it's kind of like getting in the way of a witch hunt mob. You're like, hey, don't burn that witch. That witch didn't cause the plague. And they say, well, what do you mean? You like her witch spells? It's like, I don't have an opinion about witch spells. And maybe I don't even like them. But that's not what caused the plague, so don't burn her. You know what I mean? And that's where we're at here, where you're trying to talk to these frenzied mobs that we call partisan groupthink, and they're like, well, wait a second. If you don't want to burn the witch we want to, therefore you are a witch. It's like, no,
well, the same
no,
thing
no, no, no,
happens
no.
in foreign policy over and over again. And this goes for the Branch Davidians. I mean, they were basically made into a foreign country in the middle of Central Texas for 6 weeks, and they're just demonized. And if you're defending them from what the government is doing to them, then how could you possibly be partisans of such a terrible cult? That's the way it was framed. Same thing, of course, with Saddam Hussein. I mean, here's a guy who was an avowed enemy of Osama bin Laden, who was terrified of Osama bin Laden, who easily could have been put right back in the ranks of American allies. They could have sent Donald Rumsfeld himself back over there to shake hands with him to make a deal, and instead they attacked him in the name of some pretended alliance with Osama bin Laden. But in 2002 or 3, if you question that, then there must be something terribly wrong with you, even though the answer is simply that you understand the truth and what the lie was instead.
Now, before we get into some of the latest breaking things that you've been covering with the whole Obamagate, Russiagate nonsense, as it continues to fall apart, and it continues to indict the media as well. But going back, there was some talk. I remember Senator Rand Paul said he had evidence that Brennan was surveilling him back a few years ago now, and I remember some reports suggesting that Donald Trump had been surveilled for years ago, not even before he announced his candidacy. Have you been able to look into those claims? Were there any basis for that you've been able to uncover yet, or is that still kind of just an accusation without evidence?
Yeah, you know what? I don't think I'm familiar with either of those accusations in specific.
Yeah.
Certainly Trump and I don't know about him directly, but his entire team were surveilled as part of the Russiagate hoax investigation there. But I don't know whether either of them have been targeted by the CIA for spying any worse than any of us.
Right.
But that's an important point in itself, and we know from the Vault 7 leak, heroically published by Julian Assange at WikiLeaks, that the CIA spies on us just about as bad as the NSA does. That they have their own methods of, spying on us through our television sets, through our cell phones, of course, owning every email we send, every URL or search term we enter, and I'm not sure exactly the extent of CIA's access to our phone calls, but certainly they can surveil us to the nth degree.
Yeah, and it's something that during the Bush years, the Democratic Party was leading the way in terms of signaling great fear and pushback against the notion of the Patriot Act. And this is even worse than that. I mean, the left has, of course, become silent and zealous, and not only mass surveilling citizens, but they've been silent in the persecution of whistleblowers. They've been silent and excited about people being surveilled who are opposition political leaders. They are excited about the incarceration of people who knew Trump for nonviolent crimes, and yet we're told by the left, no, we need to get rid of nonviolent crimes. No, we need to have civil liberties. That just threw all out the window as soon as it came to this Obamagate.
Yep, it's a hugely important point. Liberals and progressives rightfully said that George Bush had confessed publicly to millions of felony counts. The FISA statute, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978, is a criminal statute that says that if they're going to have a warrant, they either need to abide by the Fourth Amendment when it comes to criminal investigations, or that when it's an intelligence investigation, where it's not necessarily a matter of law breaking, but just counterintelligence to protect the United States from foreign adversaries, foreign governments, or foreign terrorist groups, that they need to go to this FISA court. They can't do it on their own say-so. They have to go to this FISA court, and they need only demonstrate a suspicion that someone is an agent of a foreign power. Not that they've necessarily done anything wrong. They just have to show that there's reason to believe that somebody is an agent of a foreign power. And so, George Bush was violating that when he got caught, of course, he was caught violating that law, as well as the Fourth Amendment, with all of his spying on the American people. But that's the same law that the Obama government was breaking in applying it to the Donald Trump campaign. And this is not a marginal campaign. This was, of the two major parties, this was one of them. And this was the guy who had gotten the nomination, who was the major party candidate for president. And they investigated his campaign in direct violation of that FISA statute, essentially by lying to the FISA court, exploiting the FISA statute to get what amounted to an absolutely illegal wiretap. And, this part of the information has only just recently come to light, but this is really all the proof that you need to know that they knew they were lying. They weren't truly investigating to see whether the Russians had infiltrated Donald Trump's campaign or subordinate or had colluded with them in a conspiracy to steal the election or any of those things. That was just a put on all along. And the proof of that is what we found out from the Inspector General report, that when the FBI went to the FISA court and said, here's all our information about Carter Page and why we want to surveil him, they whited out. That is, they took a piece of paper, a blank little square of cut-out piece of paper, and they put it over part of another piece of paper and made a copy in order to blank out the paragraph that said that this guy is a loyal agent of the CIA. Not an officer, but an agent, a guy who's been essentially hired by them. And the one time that he had ever been approached by Russian intelligence agents in Russia, he went straight to his CIA handlers, like a good asset would, and told them everything. And the CIA vouched for him. This was, I guess, part of the compartmentalized CIA that wasn't in on the plot against him. And they reported to the FBI, this guy belongs to us, and he's a good guy. Patriotic, loyal American. Don't worry about him. And the FBI blacked that out and then went and told the FISA judges, yeah, we think this guy is an agent of the Russians. Not blacked it out, again, whited it out, right? They didn't redact it. They covered it up with a white piece of paper and made a copy so that it was deleted, essentially, from the paperwork, if you understand what
That's a deliberate crime.
That's right, and it goes to reveal their motive, that this was just a put-on. They knew, as is again recently revealed, that McCabe, the head of counterintelligence at the FBI, had determined that there's nothing here with this Papadopoulos thing. I mean, they had set him up in the first place. They sent this guy, Stephen Halper, who was a known fixer for the Bush family going back to the election of 1980. They got him to try to seed this story about Russians having Hillary's emails to Papadopoulos, to try to get Papadopoulos to repeat it back to somebody else, which apparently he did, at least according to Alexander Downer, this Australian official, who then went and told the FBI about it. But then they were ready to drop it. They said, McCabe says that they didn't think that they could build a FISA warrant around Papadopoulos no matter what. So it was at that point that they switched to Carter Page, and then they had to lie about Carter Page in order to pretend, lie by omission, but in the most deliberate and explicit way, in order to pretend that they thought that he was an agent of the Russians, just in order to continue the investigation. Again, this is in the summer of 2016 into a major party candidate for president. So there's your foreign intelligence agency meddling in the election. The FBI and the CIA are the ones doing the meddling.
We're speaking with
absolutely outside of their lane by 100 miles.
We're speaking with Scott Horton of the Scott Horton Show. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. We're going to continue to unpack Obamagate and Russiagate live in just a moment.
A lot lawsuit is a devastating process for families. It can be an emotional roller coaster ride. There is a law firm in Tampa Bay that practices with this in mind. That law firm is Catania and Catania. We know and handle personal injury law for families with care. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania and Catania will take care of the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't even realize they can claim compensation for their loss until they talk to us. Catania and Catania only represent private individuals. We treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's our way of practicing law. It's our commitment to you. Remember, we don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com, award-winning, over 28 years, and family first. Catania Catania, personal injury, auto accident, and motorcycle accident attorneys.
Attorney spokeswoman.
The one thing that we've learned from an epidemic is that if we are healthy, we are far less likely to be susceptible to grave sickness. With that stated, stem cell activation is a big part of keeping ourselves healthy. By activating your own stem cells, you'll experience energy, better sleep, reduction in pain, and a support system that supports faster healing from wounds. LifeWave X39 patches are an easy, cost-affordable way to activate stem cells. Clinical studies demonstrate that LifeWave patches reset the genes in the body to a younger, healthier state. By wearing the daily patch, your body will activate the stem cells to give you benefits of a better way of living a healthy, productive life. Go to lifewave.com/B-radio to see how you can elevate, activate, and regenerate your life with stem cell therapy. There's a special offer now with B-radio. The address again is lifewave.com/B-radio. Live healthier and wiser with the X39 LifeWave patches at lifewave.com/B-radio.
Have you hired a business that didn't deliver the results you were looking for? Are you fed up with misleading sales pitches or just not getting the customer service you want? Check out Harbor Bluff's Living Magazine and Network the next time you need to hire either a lawyer, realtor, construction crew, or even a personal trainer. Harbor Bluff's Living Magazine and Network will help you find the right business for all your needs. And you'll work with people that truly care about you as well as giving back to the community. So for the right hire, visit HarborBluffsLiving.com.
Thanks for listening to 1040 WHBO. We've seen unprecedented growth in listening over the last several months. Our ad partners are experiencing great success, and we thank you for supporting the many advertisers on this station. If you own a business or handle the marketing for a business, contact us. We'll get your message across the many media platforms we own. Call 813-250-3883. That's 813-250-3883. Or send us a note, web@radiogenesis.com. That's web@radiogenesis.com.
What's going on with the nefarious swamp creatures? What are they doing? Why? In regards to what's being called Obamagate by President Trump. Good marketer, knows how to find a good term. And, you know, one of the things that I get irritated is that just because you don't like somebody doesn't mean you throw out everything to destroy them. And you'd think, you know, all these fancy journalists that go off to these elite schools, in journalism school, or maybe they go to Ivy League schools and they get all these fancy degrees and they don't have any civility. There's no decency. There's no moral principles. It's just, hey, we know this thing's a total sham, but we're just going to manipulate like a just blatant liars. And if they were dumb enough to believe something that we all knew was garbage from the moment we looked at it, you know, then they shouldn't be reporting. They should be working in a job that has no way to let their lying tongue or their ignorant tongue spew nonsense like a bunch of children. And joining me to unpack this is someone who's a true independent thinker. He's the author of the book Fool's Errand, which is about the Afghanistan war. Scott Horton of the Scott Horton Show returns. So, Scott, let's pick up where we left off. So they tried to go after George Papadopoulos, tried to frame him, right? And then they went after Carter Page. Was that the sequence of events?
Right. They just didn't have enough to even run with Papadopoulos. They were happy to let, you know, all of their followers believe that he was the basis of the investigation, but the investigation itself, we now know, dismissed him immediately. And then since they had nothing, they had to switch to the framing of Carter Page as their excuse to tap and spy on the Trump campaign. And then, of course, at the same time, you have the DNC leaks. In fact, a way to approach the subject might be the newest revelations, because they kind of go to the different aspects. So that's one thing. Then you have with the DNC email hack and leak to WikiLeaks, that it now has come out that CrowdStrike, the private company that assessed that, yes, it must have been the Russians what did it, and gave that information to the Democrats and to the FBI, that they admitted under oath to Congress in December of 2017, Trump's first year, the end of Trump's first year, under oath they admitted that, yeah, well, no, we don't have any concrete evidence that it was the Russians, that, or even when the data was removed from the DNC, and et cetera, like this. So if you go back and then trace from there the accusation that it was the Russians who hacked and leaked the emails through WikiLeaks, which is really the core accusation at the heart of all of this, which even debunkers have been afraid to challenge in many ways, it seems like. It turns out that there's really no reason to believe that the Russians did it whatsoever. In fact, there's plenty of reason to believe that they didn't, such as Julian Assange swearing that they didn't. And I talked to Craig Murray, the former Russian ambassador and friend of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, and he says he met with the leaker of the DNC emails. He knows who that person was, and that person has no conceivable connection to Russia whatsoever, and that had nothing to do with it. But
has he been in contact with the Bob Barr investigation that's been going on?
I don't know, but I doubt it. I know that the Mueller investigation sure never contacted him about that, and nor did they interview Julian Assange, because they didn't want to hear what they had to say there. But, in the intelligence assessment, which is a made-up thing, right? This is not a national intelligence estimate. It's just a hand-picked, they admitted later, Clapper admitted, he hand-picked a couple of guys from the FBI, CIA, and NSA to put out this intelligence assessment just 3 days before Trump's inauguration on January 17th, 2017, in order to say that, yep, the Russians intervened in the election all right, and they did it in order to rig the election for Trump. And they put that out, and if you read it, the thing is just absolutely thin. They make no real case in there. Was that bumper music playing?
Yeah, it's okay. We've got 30 seconds.
They admit they have only medium confidence in this. In other words, the information that the Russians did on that point, the information that the Russians did, it came from CrowdStrike through the FBI, not from the NSA, who are the only ones who would really know.
It's just hard to process how so much of the media could all be locked into a lie. It's just hard to breathe. I mean, it's hard to unpack that and really take that seriously. That so many folks from so many different outlets, AP, CBS, NBC, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal. I'm sure there was a few maybe, but
and for 3 years straight.
Yeah. And they love that free press moniker, which sounds about as accurate as the Patriot Act, right? Yep. Well, we're going to continue to unpack this with Scott Horton. I want people to know about the Scott Horton Show and also your book, Fool's Errand, which dissects the blunder of the Afghanistan war. Also, check out antiwar.com, where you can find a lot of Scott's work as we continue to unpack blunder after blunder and fake news after fake news. Don't miss it. We'll be back in a second.
Special report, coronavirus update. President Trump has deemed churches and other houses of worship as essential, and he wants them to open.
These are places that hold our society together and keep our people united. The people are demanding to go to church and synagogue, go to their mosque. Many millions of Americans embrace worship as an essential part of life.
Alabama has seen a spike in new COVID-19 cases, and the capital city of Montgomery is dangerously short on ICU hospital beds. But Governor Kay Ivey says Alabama needs to get up and running.
We cannot sustain a delayed way of life as we search for a vaccine. There are many viruses that we live with and have worked necessary precautions into our daily lives. And similarly, it's now time that we move forward and further open our state.
On Wall Street, the Dow closed down 9 points. I'm Ann Cates.
This is good news, maybe exactly when you need it to. Right now, MediShare is waiving their new member fees. This could save you money on top of all that you'll save each month by becoming a member of MediShare. So many people are looking for a healthcare solution right now, seeing the cost of COBRA plans, for instance, and MediShare is the affordable alternative to health insurance. The typical family saves $500 a month. You might save even more. MediShare is a Christian community that shares each other's healthcare costs, and because of the current economic situation, they're making it easier than ever. Apply by May 30th, and you can save an additional $170 on your first month. I'll give you the number here in a second, and if you call, you can get a price within 2 minutes. Just tell them the promo code SHARE to receive your additional savings. Maybe now is the time to make the switch like more than 400,000 people already have and start saving. Here it is. Call 844-91-BIBLE. That's 844-91-BIBLE. 844-91-BIBLE.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornoski, your host. Glad it's Friday. Glad to have another week of hopefully growth and productivity as we try to piece our life back together after the disastrous blunder that was the government-forced lockdown across this country and across the world. Hey, this is what it's always. Freedom is always the underdog. Stupidity and tyranny is always the preference of the crowd, and that's what we've always wrestled with. This isn't new. It's just it's just kind of surprised us how quickly so much of the public would just say, "Okay, whatever you believe, just tell us." I saw a woman, I guess a reporter or someone saying, "Just tell us, Dr. Birx, what we need to do. Tell us the instructions about how we're supposed to live." And I thought, I mean, how sad is it that you really, as an adult, have to get your instructions for living from a government bureaucrat? I mean, in 21st century, knowing how much they get it wrong, knowing how prone to error a monopoly is, that you say, please just tell us the instructions. This is nothing but religious worship and fervor. Just tell me what to do. I just need to be told what to do. This is nothing that is anything that any rational person or sane or sober-minded person should tune into. Turn it off, take care of yourself, get some sunshine, and let's unpack some more fake news so we know what's going on. Thankfully, we have my friend Scott Horton, host of the Scott Horton Show, with us, author of the book Fool's Errand, which just totally unpacks the blunders of the Afghanistan war. That's what Scott does. He takes fake news and he takes foreign policy, and he really gives you the truth. He doesn't put you into a partisan silo as a kind of cheap way of doing things. I see a tweet here, Scott, by Matt Gaetz, congressman from Florida. Some of our listeners who are joining us in the Florida area know of him. I predict Georgia's story, in reference to George Papadopoulos, is about to take center stage even more. So apparently he's getting some conversations in the background that are going to be coming to the foreground here in regards to the attack against George Papadopoulos by our government.
Well, I mean, and this is the thing about it, again, as you were saying at the start of this thing, it doesn't matter whether you're pro or anti-Trump or you used to be one way or the other or any of these things. Forget all of that. Just look at this in its barest context. You have the FBI's counterintelligence division and the CIA conspiring to try to wreck a major party candidate for president, to try to prevent him from being elected by smearing him as a traitor. And then after he got elected, they tried to rig it, and I know this sounds crazy. I urge your people to double-check me, because I know it sounds crazy coming out of my mouth, but I'm just observing what happened. They really had a plan to have Michael Morell, the acting head of the CIA, brief the Electoral College to tell them that the Russians stole this election for Trump and you have to give it to Hillary Clinton. And that if they wouldn't go along with that, maybe they could get them to at least tie and throw the election to the House of Representatives, which could then at least, if not give it to Hillary, give it to Paul Ryan or Colin Powell. And they were working hard to see if they could do this, which also goes to show their total ignorance of the American system, where the Electoral College is made up of people from the states, from the state parties, who all travel there to go and vote. They're not all from the country club, from Georgetown outside of Washington, D.C., where they're going to play ball with betraying Donald Trump for Hillary Clinton in the Electoral College. I mean, the whole thing is just completely bananas. And then, as I was saying, they released this completely ridiculous, tissue paper thin, so-called made-up intelligence assessment, claiming that the Russians had rigged the election for Trump. And then, as we know now, they discussed repeatedly whether, and apparently with some people on Trump's first cabinet, of whether they could possibly invoke the 25th Amendment to overthrow him, which, by the way, you're probably thinking, but I went to high school, and I don't remember them teaching me that the 25th Amendment says that the CIA can do a coup if they want, the Justice Department can do a coup. That's not what it says. It's about if the president is incapacitated, like when Woodrow Wilson had a stroke, or if the Russians dropped an H-bomb on D.C. and they have to, give the power to the Secretary of the Interior or whatever it is. Has nothing to do with if there are unproven accusations of Russian intervention, then you just do a coup and overthrow the winner of the American election. It's crazy. And then we know from their own words, and they were very overconfident for a long time discussing this stuff. And the FBI officials told CNN, once they realized that they just weren't going to be able to get away with invoking the 25th Amendment to overthrow Trump and put Pence in there instead, that then they decided, well, we'll do everything we can to rein him in. That's their words, to rein him in. And why? To prevent him from what he called in the campaign getting along with Russia, which is what the American people wanted, which was part of his advantage over Hillary Clinton in the campaign, which she was talking about shooting down Russian MiGs to protect Al-Qaeda in Syria. And Trump was saying this is insane, and the American people were saying, yes, that's what we think too. And it was. And but there's so much money and so much power and so much corruption in the policy of creating this new second Cold War with Russia, which in fact does not threaten the United States, or for that matter, even our allies in Eastern Europe, much less Western Europe. It's America that's the aggressor in Eastern Europe and in encircling and threatening Russia and picking a fight with Russia, and all of the propaganda to the contrary notwithstanding. And because Trump said, no, you know what, I'm more worried about China. I want to tilt toward Russia in order to use them to hem in the Chinese, which is not a policy I support, but at least he's getting half of it right, that we ought to be getting along with the Russians. They just said that was crazy. And in fact, this is actually, again, newly released out, that Susan Rice said that she had this meeting with Flynn, where Flynn, instead of just saying, yeah, whatever you think, lady, you're right, instead of that, he said, no, you're wrong, forget Russia. Russia's no big deal. It's all about China. And she said, she decided then, oh, my God, the Russians must have gotten to him, because she just couldn't believe that anyone could think that.
And
it was obviously a perfectly reasonable point of view, not the China part, but the get along with Russia part. And this was a guy who was the former head of the DIA, who is very familiar with the Russians, to say the least.
But Scott, what's interesting to me, what you just said there, is that they've put this full court press weaponizing the FBI and the CIA and all these other agencies to do this whole manufactured attack against the American, electorate process, the electoral process.
That's right.
And I think
absolute outrage.
And what's interesting to me about what you said there is that, you said, well, Trump got it half right. He wanted to just pivot and start being aggressive towards China. What is it about the permanent bureaucracy that runs these CIA and FBI and these things that they would prefer to stay aggressive against Russia versus China. That's interesting to me because I'm with you. I don't think we should be, doing aggressive moves to either country. But why is it, and what would it be? Maybe I'm just speculating here. Why would the bureaucracy prefer one front versus another? Why don't they say, okay, you know what? Look, we'll make a lot of money drum beating against China. That's okay. Let's just keep what we have. Status quo continues. But no, they weaponized and marshaled the whole apparatus they had against this guy's campaign and his presidency because he pivoted the aggressive from Russia towards China. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think it's because Putin stymied, especially the hawks, inside the Obama administration multiple times. So starting with Ukraine, just the very short version of Ukraine is that the Obama government overthrew the government in Kiev in February of 2014, backing a street putsch, essentially, against the elected government and supporting, severe right-wing nationalists, proud grandsons of the Galatian SS, extreme right-wing Hitler-loving Nazi types who were part of the coalition that came to power there and then immediately went to war with the pro-Russian people of the far east of the country. And the Russians then intervened to protect those people. And it was a terrible war. They didn't outright invade, but they sent special forces across and so forth. And there's a terrible war. Most of the civilians killed were on the pro-Russian side. And then also, of course, they seized the Crimean Peninsula without killing anyone, not firing a single shot in anger, a couple warning shots, but nobody was killed. But they seized the Crimean Peninsula, which was a huge humiliation, and part of the reason America overthrew the government in Kiev in the first place was so they could try to kick the Russians out of the Sevastopol naval base there in Crimea, which might sound very far away to your audience, but is of extreme importance to the American empire and, for that matter, to the Russian one. And then, of course, Obama backed al-Qaeda and their friends in Syria from 2011 through the end of his presidency. And even after the rise of the Islamic State, he was still backing their rivals in al-Qaeda there in Syria. And in 2015, in the end of 2015, when the Islamic State started marching on Damascus, or at least they had severed the major highway between Damascus and Aleppo and were ready to march on Damascus, Vladimir Putin finally intervened in that war and essentially saved the Assad regime from the American pro-al-Qaeda regime change policy in that country, and so humiliated them again and stymied their, their most essential policy.
Just seems like this deep state.
So they were really upset.
Yeah, it just seems like this
by the end of the Obama years.
Yeah, it just seems like the deep state has a preference to work with China. They want to play with them. They don't want to play with Russia. It's weird. I don't know.
Maybe they have. Who you ask, right? If you look at the, it's really interesting and in a way obvious that you have inside the military, you have the Air Force and the Army are most concerned about Russia, but the Navy and Marine Corps are most concerned about China.
Huh.
And why is that, right? It's obvious. It's because it's in their own parochial interest to pursue these policies, right? They're just a bunch of job holders, is what H.L. Mencken would have called them.
What about John Ratcliffe, the U.S. congressman from Texas, who's now been, going to be the new, head of the U.S. intelligence agencies? Does he seem like someone who would be straight shooter about this as much as a politician can be?
Oh, you know what? I don't know enough about that. I assume he must be a terrible hawk on Iran and China and who knows what. But at least he's, I think, if I understand it right, he was just kind of a low-level congressman, and Trump is really making his career with this. It's really giving him a huge promotion, and so he's already done the right thing in releasing the classified transcripts of this testimony before Congress from December 2017, which reveals, a lot more shenanigans about Russiagate there. And so I would expect him to be partisan enough in favor of the president himself that I would at least hope that he continues to declassify secrets about Russiagate and reveal the plot against the president.
Yeah, I'm just seeing here 2 hours ago, George Papadopoulos tweeted out, "It's my understanding that there are hit pieces about me coming soon trying to say I made up the story about Mifsud." He said, "Fact, the Durham probe became a criminal probe only after a trip to Italy to learn about Mifsud and who was handling him as he met me." So that's interesting. Another breaking story on the Gateway Pundit says, evidence indicates that the entire plot to prevent Trump from winning the election in 2016 and governing, if he won, started in Italy. And I guess there's some Italian intelligence groups that are involved in this. Have you looked at this side of the story?
No, I don't know about that.
Yeah. It's interesting to see how this, it's just so many pieces.
Yeah. It was MI6, which is the Brits.
Right.
But I don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, it's almost dizzying to try to keep up with all this, but I guess that's the nature of that world that they're operating in, right? There's a lot of double agents and all this stuff.
We got to talk about Mike Flynn here again a little more, because so here he was a 4-star general, or I'm sorry, maybe a 3-star. But anyway, he was Stanley McChrystal's right-hand man in the Afghanistan surge. He plays a big part in my book, Fool's Errand, by the way. But then, he was an Iran hawk and a China hawk, but was good on Syria, for one thing, which is one of the reasons Obama hated him so much. But when he came in, this supposedly controversial conversation he had with the Russian ambassador Kislyak, which they tried to spin as this high as treason, these charges that have now been dropped, that he lied to the FBI about that even, has all fallen apart now. But at the time that happened, he was the designated incoming national security advisor of the president-elect. This was not during the campaign. This was after the election. He had every right in the world to be on the phone with the Russian ambassador or any ambassador in the world that he wanted to. And the Democrats tried to spin this as the most controversial thing, but there's just nothing controversial about it whatsoever. They had every right to do that. And Obama just put these sanctions on the Russians and kicked some of their diplomatic personnel out of the country. Mike Flynn got on the phone with Kislyak and said, listen, don't overreact to that, okay? We're coming in a few weeks, and we don't want to increase tensions. We want to decrease them. So instead of doing tit for tat and putting sanctions on us and kicking our diplomatic staff out, why don't you guys just cool your jets? And that worked. And in fact, they invited the American diplomatic staff to a big Christmas party instead of kicking them out. And so that part of it was fine. In fact, if there was any real scandal there, it was collusion with the Israelis. And they were trying to get, Mike Flynn asked Kislyak to get the Russians to veto a resolution against Israel in the UN Security Council. And Kislyak told him no. So instead of this phone call being Kislyak giving Mike Flynn his orders, his marching orders as this, pro-Russian traitor, it's Flynn asking the Russians for a favor with no strings attached, of course, and them saying no thank you. And then that's it. So that was the most scandalous part of it, the part that the media will never mention, that he was, carrying Israel's water, not Russia's.
Wow.
But then they just pretended to believe that he had no right to be on this phone call, that maybe he was in violation of the Logan Act, which is, from John Adams, right around the time of the Alien Sedition Acts, and just as unconstitutional and just as unenforced as those acts have been in the last 200 years. It's a complete joke. And then they absolutely just framed him. They came and said, listen, we just want to have a friendly chat. We're not questioning you. We're not interrogating you. We just want your best recollection, because we're on the hunt of some Ruskies. And so, and they pulled the same stunt on his assistant, KT McFarland, where she said, well, wait a minute, do I need a lawyer? And they're like, no, we're just your friends here to trick you into saying something that we can later pretend to believe is a lie. And in fact, we even have on paper where they admitted they did not believe he was lying at the time, but then they spun this as proof that he was covering up his treason. Yeah, he was the bag man for Putin, controlling Trump.
Scott, hold that thought. We're going to continue on A Neighbor's Choice. We're live talking with Scott Horton of the Scott Horton Show. And man, oh man, I just can't understand. These people are acting like the big bad wolf and all these fairy tales, is hiding as grandma. I'm not going to hurt you. I mean, how in the world could anybody looking at this, Democrat, Republican, Independent, whoever, and say this is acceptable? We should all be standing in unity against this out-of-control bureaucracy that wants to become a tyrannical law unto itself. More in just a moment with Scott Horton.
A lawsuit is a devastating process for families. It can be an emotional roller coaster ride. There is a law firm in Tampa Bay that practices with this in mind. That law firm is Catania and Catania. We know and handle personal injury law for families with care. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania Catania will take care of the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't even realize they can claim compensation for their loss until they talk to us. Catania and Catania only represent private individuals. We treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's our way of practicing law. It's our commitment to you. Remember, we don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com, award-winning, over 28 years, and family first. Catania Catania, personal injury, auto accident, and motorcycle accident attorneys.
Non-attorney spokeswoman. If you know anything about NFL or about NCAA basketball or football or NHL or whatever, entertainment television, make sure you make a deposit at betdsi.com.
Promo code Bubba100.
Again, make a deposit. They've been getting a lot of great response from the Bubba Army. Make your deposit using promo code Bubba100. It's simple. Go to betdsi.com.
Promo code Bubba100.
Sign up with the Bubba100 code and make that deposit and get your bonus, plus have some fun at the safest wagering site available. Fast, on-time paying their winnings out, incredibly mobile-friendly. And if you haven't already signed up, then go now. Make your deposit at betdsi.com.
Promo code Bubba100.
Bubba100 gets you a special bonus and gets you in the game. Again, www.betdsi.com, and at the promo code portion,
Bubba100.
Bubba100. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Michael Lang, board-certified optometric physician and certified nutritional specialist, host of popular talk show Ask the Doctor. I've researched and developed an amazing new omega-3 product that you'll see incredible results with. It's called Fortify Super Omega-3 Max. I had one of the top Norwegian omega-3 research teams in conjunction with myself and Fortify Vitamins aid in the development of this advanced omega-3. This product is the most potent and purest triglyceride form omega-3 in the United States today. Omega-3 is great for all aspects of your health and well-being, especially in this unprecedented, challenging time. I am giving a 25% discount with promo code RADIO during this viral pandemic. Go to my website, fortify.com. That's FORTIFEYE. Remember the EYE in Fortify. That's fortify.com. Enter the promo code RADIO to receive the 25% discount.
Hello, David Gornoski here. We're talking with Scott Horton of the Scott Horton Show about Obamagate and the Flynn case. And it's just a wild ride, and it's amazing that these people in the media are the ones that are the most annoying about this, because it's like they love touting, I'm with the free press, and we just freely, spontaneously get everything wrong. And everything in the service of more war, more bombs, more starvation sanction campaigns, more division amongst every line imaginable in our culture. They just do nothing but sow hate and division en masse. Of course, there's a few guys and girls that get in there that report well, but I mean, just the total lack of any intelligent commentary or analysis about what we're talking about here today, especially this Flynn story. Scott Horton, so what's going on with this Judge Sullivan? Sounds like he wants to be the prosecutor. Sounds like he wants the good old Soviet style where it's just a fixed court, where the judge is your prosecutor too?
Oh, man. This is something that is really, I have to say, surprising even to me about this, that when the Attorney General had the charges dropped, which, by the way, he didn't just make that call by himself. he had assigned a career high-level DOJ attorney to review the whole thing. And that guy put his stamp on the idea that, look, this guy was essentially set up here. There is not even a case for lying to the FBI, which they can make a case against anyone for lying to the FBI. And just, it doesn't really hold up here. So they went to dismiss that. So all the liberals, the center-left Hillary Clintonites out there, the Democrats, started screaming that this is the end of the rule of law, not entrapping this guy, with a fake Logan Act threat and threatening to imprison his son on, again, another trumped-up charge that is almost never enforced except when they want to, which is acting on behalf of a foreign power without registering to do so. In this case, the Turks, a NATO ally, but still, it was corruption, but not that bad. But anyway, they threatened to put his son in prison for it. And again, it's selective enforcement. They'll let 999 D.C. lobbyists go free on that charge and just use it when they want to hurt someone they don't have anything else against, frankly, here. But so the liberals freaked out and said, oh, this is the end of the rule of law and all of this, which is just hilarious. And so the judge said, well, you know what? Just because the prosecutors want to dismiss the charges, I don't have to agree to that. And in fact, so I'm going to keep the charges for now. And he appointed a lawyer to see about maybe we can prosecute him for perjury for changing his plea from not guilty or from guilty to not guilty. Well, before he admitted it. Now he's saying he's not guilty. So he was either lying before or he's lying now, which is just crazy. And I don't know if maybe they do get away with doing something like that on the margin in America, but I kind of doubt it. That's the first thing I've ever heard in my life. They try to charge them with perjury for changing their plea. I mean, talk about grasping at straws to try to do that. As Matt Taibbi said, all these liberals are cheering for this when if the roles were reversed, the criticism is obvious that this is the kind of thing that you would expect to see in Belarus, where the judge doesn't like it when the prosecutor doesn't feel like pursuing a case, and the judge decides to go ahead and pursue it anyway for political reasons like this. That this is America, that they could do that? It's not. And now, why is this Obamagate? It's Obamagate because, again, we're only just finding out from recently released documents, in this case, previously more heavily redacted memos, that Barack Obama was intimately involved. And Joe Biden was standing right there, too, when they met with John Brennan, James Clapper, and James Comey to all decide about pursuing this case against Flynn, this spying on Flynn, even though, of course, the whole thing was just completely trumped up. And they had no legitimate suspicion that he was really representing the Russians in any way or doing anything like that for them. And, Obama was there. The way it happened, what it is Rice sent an email to herself, Susan Rice, sent an email, the National Security Advisor, sent an email to herself saying, yep, we met today with Brennan and Comey and them, and Obama insisted they do everything by the book. But this is weeks later. This is like on December 31st or something like that, or on Inauguration Day maybe, January 20th. She's writing this to herself, basically just CYA, right? Protecting herself and throwing them under the bus, which is where they belong.
It's fascinating. Scott, we're going to have you on again sometime to keep unpacking this because, man, the scandals just keep piling up, and it's hard to keep track of it. But thankfully, we have folks like you, Scott Horton, out there getting into the weeds of things, unpacking the facts, and analyzing it in a way that everyone can understand that this is a corrupt system, and Obama is certainly not a scandal-free president. That's for sure. Thanks, Scott. A Neighbor's Choice will continue in just a moment with David Cayley of CBC Radio.